Good morning. I'm Ashley Cagle, Assistant Executive Director for Wake County Economic Development. Thank you for joining our third seminar as part of our virtual Economic Development Summit. So far, we've heard from Ted Abernathy as he shared insight into the future of our regional economy post-pandemic, and we heard from Danya Perry as he hosted local elected leaders to discuss the importance of economic mobility and inclusive prosperity. Today, you'll be among the first to see the new data from our regional skills analysis. We are excited to share the results with you. Before we start the presentation, we wanted to recognize Raleigh Chamber members, EDGE investors, and our many partners for continuing to support this community and each other during this time. We also would like to thank our elected officials who have joined us today for their continued leadership. We sincerely appreciate the support of all the sponsors. Because of their commitment to the summit, we are able to bring you information, resources, and tangible takeaways in a virtual format. Thank you to each of these sponsors. Our gold sponsor is Credit Suisse. Our silver sponsors are the City of Raleigh, Office of Economic Development and Innovation, and Highwoods Properties. Our bronze sponsors are the Carolina Hurricanes, Martin Marietta, Relate Advocacy, and Wake Technical Community College. Thank you again, sponsors. During the seminar, let's stay connected. Join today's discussion on Twitter. Use the hashtag EconDevSummit20 and tag us at Raleigh Wake and at Raleigh Chamber. Please also note you will receive a recording of this presentation and a blog recapping the event in the next few days. Today's seminar will feature a presentation sharing the results from our Regional Skills Analysis Survey. The analysis is a combined effort between the Raleigh Chamber, Wake County Economic Development, the City of Raleigh, Capital Area Workforce Development Board, and over 200 regional and statewide industry associations and partners. Thank you to all who were involved in creating and promoting the survey. The analysis was first completed in 2017. It surveyed site and HR leads from around the region. This year, we extended the survey to the Cape Fear region to expand the results. We are pleased to share that the Triangle region received over 725 responses, and the Cape Fear region currently has 315 responses with 2 weeks left to go in their survey. The objective of the Regional Skills Analysis Survey is to gain a better understanding of the current and future state of the local workforce, skills gaps, and trends in growth, hiring, and industry development. Additionally, the survey data will inform a coordinated strategy to prepare economic and workforce development partners to address the needs of industry partners as we navigate the economic recovery. 3 years ago, we received very compelling data that showed a real-time example of the current and future state of the workforce. For example, in 2017, 73% of our companies plan to grow and add between 22,000 and 36,000 jobs. Additionally, we uncovered that a vast majority of employees were being sourced through friends and networks, indicating a lack of diversity in our talent pipeline. In a few minutes, you'll see the results for this year's survey and begin to start comparing data points. If you would like to take a quick look at the survey data from 2017, check the chat box for a link to the survey results. We are excited to unveil this year's survey results. While we didn't anticipate a global pandemic to hit shortly after we launched the survey, we quickly shifted our marketing to repurpose the survey to help gather information to inform the recovery of the region. Today, you'll hear from Mike Hogan of RTI International as he unveils our survey findings. We want to thank RTI International for their continued partnership in this effort locally and helping us to scale this across the state. At the end of Mike's presentation, we will be discussing the results and we'll be taking questions from you. We invite you to use the question function, not the chat function, to submit questions that will be shared with me. At any time during the presentation, please submit your question. Now, I would like to introduce Mike Hogan, a research economist for RTI International. Mike specializes in helping local policymakers translate economic trends into actionable, locally informed strategies for inclusive economic development. He is building on 3 years of experience in regional economic analysis, cost-benefit analysis, case study research, program evaluation, interview-based research, and geospatial analysis. Mike's key focus areas include regional economic diversification and value chain-based strategies, as well as the linkage between the regional economy and urban development, including the built environment, transit access, and economic vibrancy. And now we are ready to get started. Mike, you have control of the screen and we are ready for you to begin your presentation.
Thank you for the introduction, Ashley. And I really been an honor to work with you and with everyone over the course of this project. It has been, to say the least, a interesting time to be conducting a survey on workforce and skills, and has been a project that has forced us to pivot very quickly. This was a project that we began together in 2017 with the goal of understanding how to best equip and coordinate regional assets around workforce and economic development. And our goal was 3 years ago to gather data for the next 3 years and understand what that meant for economic development. We did not anticipate that in the spring of 2020 we would be looking at an economic scenario where we are facing a global pandemic and economic shutdown. So this has been a very unique experience in being able to pivot quickly and address a new challenge. Given that, we are really excited to share these findings with you today. So what we're going to do is go over our background and context on this project, an overview of what we did during the survey, the kinds of responses we received, and then some of our initial findings, our outlook, company's outlook on hiring, the types of skills and credentials that they're looking for, some initial takeaways, and our next steps. And we'll be following this up with a Q&A with a mix of questions that were submitted in advance, as well as questions from the audience. So when we started this survey at the end of 2019, getting all of our resources and partners together, we did not anticipate that we would be where we are in July 2020. We today, looking at the context of this kind of work, are looking at a period where nationally we're facing double-digit unemployment. The national picture, as we've seen, headline unemployment as a result of the pandemic hit its peak in April and has declined slightly as businesses started to reopen and take employees off furlough. But one data point to look at, the U5, an indicator of long-term unemployment, is rising, which indicates to us that we may be looking at a longer-term jobs recovery than initially anticipated. Additionally, in the state of North Carolina, over the last couple of months, leisure and hospitality services have been the hardest hit sector. Based on data from the North Carolina Department of Commerce, the labor market conditions, and looking at the most recent data of employment changes broken down by industry, we've seen that leisure and hospitality services were among the hardest hit sectors by the coronavirus and subsequent economic crisis. However, there have also been significant losses in trade, education, and government services. And as we're seeing the ongoing spread of the virus, continued closure of retail, scaled back restaurant and hospitality businesses, uncertainty over in-person education, and a loss of tax revenue are just a few things that are going to have continued impacts on unemployment in the near future. So keeping that in mind, we're presenting this survey data in the context of a much more challenging economic situation than we were 3 years ago. So a little bit of background on what we're doing and why we're doing this. Starting in 2017, the Raleigh Chamber, Wake County Economic Development, Capital Area Workforce Board, the City of Raleigh, and other partners started looking proactively at workforce and skills. We wanted to hear from employers and set an agenda for workforce and economic development. The Asheville-Buncombe Chamber and its partners completed a similar project in 2018 and 2019. As a result, both of these regions are very proactively implementing economic development strategies with the focus on workforce. In 2020, we're continuing this work, but what we're doing is we're shifting very quickly. We're shifting from using this data to proactively look at our workforce to inform economic recovery and start to rebuild from the COVID pandemic and economic crisis. So just a little bit of background on the data that we collected. This data was collected via a survey that was distributed through, as Ashley mentioned, over 200 regional and statewide partners between March and June of 2020. This was initially designed as a follow-up to the 2017 Triangle Talent Initiative, but priorities changed quickly. The COVID pandemic and economic crisis came on very quickly, and our timing was challenging, to say the least. We were joking that the day we launched the survey was March 13th, which happened to be Friday the 13th, and who knew that Friday the 13th would be unlucky in that kind of way. However, we decided to shift. We decided to use this as a tool to understand the workforce implications and what the economic recovery would look like. So we distributed it through partners in 14 counties around the Triangle region in central North Carolina. Additionally, this survey is currently still being run in the Cape Fear region with Cape Fear Collective and partners in the Wilmington area. We received 737 responses. This represents a mix of counties, industry types, and business sizes. And one thing to note is that this is a point in time snapshot. So it's not meant to represent other regions or other years. It's a pulse survey, and it's not a statistically representative sample of all businesses in the region or in the state. But what it does give us is it does give us a snapshot of the current state of how businesses are perceiving this pandemic. I just want to say again, thank you. These are just a few of the many partners who helped share this survey in the region. None of this would have been possible without their continued support and diligent reminders to their membership and their constituents to participate in this. We had a lot of challenging conversations about, do we continue this or do we not, and came to a very, I think, strong consensus that this was what we needed to do and we needed to get this opinion from businesses. So again, I really want to thank all the partners. These are just a few of the partners that helped us to share this throughout the region. What does the data tell us? The first question that we asked, looking at all businesses across all regions, is simply, do you plan to grow your workforce in the next 3 years? And in 2020, 56.7% of companies indicated they were planning to grow in the next 3 years. That is a figure that I think gives us some optimism, but also within the context of, in 2017, nearly 74% of companies projected growth in 2017. So it does reflect a change in business sentiment towards hiring and job growth. The companies that we surveyed reported planning to hire between 17,000 and 32,000 people in the next 3 years, which the largest total numbers coming in manufacturing, healthcare, and IT. When we break it down by region, when we break it down by sector, across all the sectors surveyed, the most positive outlooks that we got came from life sciences, IT services, and manufacturing. This goes alongside, I think, a lot of disparity and differences across sectors. So restaurants, retail, and various professional services are anticipating slow growth or downsizing as a result of changing consumer habits and the ongoing spread of the pandemic. Also, something that we want to take note of is that public sector, education, and nonprofit has a much more negative outlook on job growth, with only 43% responding that they plan to grow. Something that we want to keep in mind is that something we learned during the last economic recession was that a loss of tax revenue, a loss of nonprofit fundraising, education will have long-term implications on jobs in those sectors, which are large sectors in this region. So how did this change between 2017 and 2020? We have a comparable data set to look at from 2017, doing the same survey in the same region. So compared with 2017, companies across nearly all sectors are expecting slow job growth. So with the exception of life science and logistics, all the sectors that we surveyed are expecting slower growth than they experienced in the than they projected in 2017, with really the biggest differences coming in the energy and utility sector, public sector, education, and nonprofit, construction and skilled trades, and professional and technical services. So these are sectors that we are expecting to see more of a slowdown in hiring as a result of kind of more long-term ongoing challenges related to kind of the economic downturn related to this pandemic. When we ask companies about the skills that they're looking for, and particularly the credentials that they're looking for in their workforce, we've seen a shift. In 2017, 49% of companies were most frequently looking for four-year college degrees. So when we look at the different credentials that we asked about, four-year college degrees were the most common across most industries. In this most recent survey, the most common credentials that we're looking for, that companies are looking for, were certifications in training, community college programs, associate's degrees, and certificates. And we saw an interesting change over the 3-year period, and more comments coming from employers about the need for a strong apprenticeship program for trades. We're seeing good community college graduates come out, but they're lacking the experience. We're seeing more industries that are looking for a mix of skills, a mix of technical skills coming out of community college programs, looking for something that is more of a faster turnaround, and then also a lot of need for reskilling their workforce. When we asked about the soft skills that were hardest to find in the workforce, the three that rose to the top across all industries were responsibility and self-discipline, critical thinking, and taking initiative. These are very similar to the responses that we received when we did the survey in 2017, and they're similar across industries. Additionally, employers were given the chance to write about and offer insight into other kind of open-ended questions. And I thought an interesting comment was, we're a small team environment. We have to work closely together. Interpersonal skills, trust, honesty, and integrity are major. And companies are talking about the need for more acceptance of diversity in their workforce. When given the chance to evaluate the talent pipeline, so we asked on a scale of 1 to 5, across the board, the employers generally did have a positive opinion of the talent pipeline in the region, with the average being around 3.15. The highest ratings came in life science, IT and software, professional services, which are largely indicative of the type of talent pipeline that we have in the region. So when we look at the data as a whole, and again, this is just a preliminary first look at this data. When we looked at the data as a whole, we found a few initial takeaways that we will be exploring here today, and we will be continuing to explore further as we continue to work with this data. But first, this is going to reflect in a big way a lot of what Tad Abernathy spoke about 2 weeks ago, and that's that the regional economy will recover, but job growth is going to be slower than expected, and it's going to be uneven. The abrupt shutdown was really devastating to jobs in hospitality, restaurants, and retail. In May, the BLS reported over 107,000 people unemployed in the Raleigh and the Durham, Chapel Hill metro areas. In the short term, some jobs have been added as businesses reopened, but it has not offset double-digit unemployment rates. Over the medium term, we need to look at how losses of tax revenue, depressed consumer spending, will probably lead to slowdowns, in public sector, education, utilities, construction, and various services. And as they noted in the survey, companies in those sectors are expressing a less optimistic outlook on hiring than in the past. Companies in life science, IT, manufacturing, and healthcare are continuing to be the most optimistic about hiring, and the positions that they're looking to hire for are requiring specialized skills and credentials. So frequently cited software programmers, nurses, in the manufacturing sector, it's a mix of frontline production workers, supervisors, engineers, and life science is looking for specialized positions in science and research fields. And so those positions are going to require specialized skills and credentials. As I mentioned, hiring managers, CEOs, division leads in IT, manufacturing, and healthcare emphasize the importance of specialized skills, but also adaptability and interpersonal skills. They, as every industry is, they are problem solving right now as their industries evolve. And as we look to the future, just a few comments that came up around skills in the local workforce. There's just a need to keep up with the changes in the industry. In IT services, it's not just knowledge and certifications, but also understanding the logistics of remote work. In the manufacturing sector, there's still a need for continuing training and trade skills and automation as manufacturing advances. And in healthcare, we're always going to need staff with basic hands-on patient and personal care. Some of it is the skills, but some of it is the willingness to do the work, the empathy to work in some of the hardest fields in the hospital, and then the lower grade of the pay scale. So the mix of specialized skills, technical skills, adaptability, and personal skills, interpersonal skills are going to continue to be critical in these growing industries. We saw a big difference in the way that companies are talking about certificates, credentials, and community college degrees. The percentage of companies that were looking primarily for four-year degrees declined from 2017 to 2020. In the three industries that are projecting the most growth in terms of number of jobs, the most frequently cited credentials are community college and professional certifications. This is in manufacturing, IT, and healthcare. On top of that, their current workforce is going to continue to need on-the-job training and continuing education as the demands of work change quickly. This pandemic is showing that there's a lot of work that needs to be done that can be done virtually, a lot of need for employees to start to adapt new digital skills and understand kind of how to rapidly retrain and retool their existing workforce to adapt to this new reality. One of the things that we've found frequently throughout all of our work doing workforce surveys is that friends and networks continues to be the most frequent way that companies source talent. When we ask companies, where do you most frequently source talent, friends and networks rises to the top. It's most frequently seen among small businesses, but also in large businesses in the way that they use social media and employee references. The kind of adage of it comes down to who you know, I think continues to be true. We are seeing more adoption of online job portals and social media, and companies are more frequently citing that as a source of networking and recruiting, but the friends and networks continues to be number one. And then the other thing that we're going to have to look at over the next year is with large in-person career fairs, industry conferences, and the like on hold for the near future, there is a need and also an opportunity to design new ways of networking and recruiting virtually. We need to start to break down barriers between companies and job seekers because some of these, so many of these companies now, and the whole reality of how we socialize is changing very quickly. The way that we go about networking and accessing jobs, both from the perspective of companies and the perspective of job seekers, is also going to have to adapt to this new digital reality. So where do we go from here? The first thing that I want to keep in mind with everybody, this is our initial analysis of the data. We will be providing more analysis, including industry-specific and region-specific results in the upcoming weeks, and sharing them via the regional chambers and partners. We'll also be developing kind of new brochure, new collateral, new ways of sharing this data with the Raleigh Chamber and its partners, and then there will be a full data dashboard that users can filter by industry. RTI is continuing to collect data in the Cape Fear region with the support of the Wilmington Chamber, Cape Fear Collective, and its partners. And RTI will be working to share these findings with industry, economic development, and workforce partners to help plan over the next couple of months for workforce development, training, and connecting people to new employment opportunities. So this is the start of how do we address kind of collectively this challenge that we're going to have over the next couple of years regarding employment, regarding getting people into jobs, and addressing a lot of the upcoming economic challenges that are going to be related to this economic recovery, as well as workforce and employment. With that, I want to say thank you, and I want to open up to questions. I know that we've started with a few questions that we received previously, and I think Ashley is going to join again and start to share the questions and the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for sharing all of that information, and just so everybody knows the timeline that we're working with here, because we ended up launching this in a pandemic, we had to extend our timeline. So Mike and his team have been working literally around the clock since last week when we closed the survey to trend this data so we would have it for today. So really appreciate everything that you've done to get us to this point. Mike, you and the team have done. I want to also just quickly give a shout out to Megan Lewis, who I know is on the call today. Megan is in Wilmington. She's with the Cape Fear Collective, but it was really Megan's vision that helped us launch this in Asheville first and now in the Wilmington region. And we are hopeful that more regions in North Carolina will take this on as a way for them to take some accountability for workforce development and economic development. So thanks so much, Megan, for your role in this. Mike, we've got some questions that we're going to ask you and move through. The first thing is, what was the most unexpected finding in the data?
The first thing that jumped out to me was manufacturing. Actually, was that when we looked at the company and we asked the companies, do you expect to grow and how many people do you expect to hire in the next 3 years? Manufacturing was one of the industries that really rose to the top as far as the percentage of companies that were expecting to grow their workforce and the number of jobs that they were looking to add. So there were several large manufacturers that were continuing to, kind of medium and large manufacturers that plan to continue to grow their workforce. And I was also pleasantly surprised to see that despite a very negative economic outlook, still over half of the companies that we surveyed said that they are going to continue to grow their workforce in the next 3 years. So both of those were good surprises. I know that we've seen a lot of very negative economic data and very negative jobs data, and that's real. And there are some real challenges around jobs and hiring, but seeing that there is optimism coming from employers is a good surprise to see.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting as you talk about manufacturing, just reflecting on our own project activity that we have at Wake County Economic Development right now. Advanced manufacturing and life science projects account for about 50% of our total project activity right now. That's both inbound projects looking to locate in Wake County and also our existing industries looking to expand. So I think it is reassuring to see the data support a trend that we are seeing through our project activity. I want to go back a little bit, go back to 2017. And since 2017 and the data that we received then, do you feel like the data then supports what has actually happened over the last 3 years? Was it an accurate look at what transpired?
One thing that I think did transpire was that in 2017 when we asked companies this similar question about what are your expectations of growth and hiring, we saw some of the most positive outlooks or the most optimistic outlooks coming from life science, from IT, but also from construction and manufacturing. And the way that the regional economy has grown over the last 3 years has been indicative of that. So there have been a lot of jobs added in those industries where they expected to see growth.
Yeah, I agree with that. And from our end, the work that we've done has certainly been in sync with what we uncovered then. So I do think that this skills analysis is a helpful way for all of us to sort of get on the same page and understand what's coming down the pipeline. So one thing that we can't ignore right now is that everything is virtual. I mean, here we are giving this presentation in a virtual format, and for the foreseeable future, this is our reality. So there's been a lot of talk about moving forward with job fairs and networking online. And I know that our partners at Capital Area and Wake Tech are taking that very seriously and taking measures for that to happen. However, does this exacerbate the digital divide that already exists, and how do we address that?
So the short answer is absolutely. The demand today for high quality, high speed internet is more essential than ever. And individuals who are out of work and lack reliable internet access are at a large disadvantage because even if in the past they would have gone to a public library or another public space to access the internet, if those spaces are closed as well, it makes it even more challenging to be able to access job applications, networking, job fairs. On the flip side, it changes the paradigm a little bit as well and pulls away some other obstacles that people face to accessing things like job fairs or interviews. Those could include access to childcare, access to transit, the time that's needed to take to drive from one place to another. And so it places a totally new, it changes the paradigm, I think, in a lot of ways of the way that people look for work, the way that people apply for work, and then the way that companies are going to have to go about sourcing and hiring. As we said, friends and networks still continue to be the most important way that companies are looking to recruit and source talent. And so for people to have access to those networks, the way that they do it is going to be very different, and it's going to demand high quality internet access, but also a more optimistic outlook is that it's going to break down some of the barriers that people have had to access certain networks if they can do it virtually instead of in person.
Yeah, and I think that's an extremely important point, specifically for our business partners who are attending today and are thinking about, what hiring looks like in their future. Thinking of ways to diversify how they are sourcing their talent is going to be extremely important. You have that long list in the data of ways that people are sourcing talent, friends and networks at the top, but then there's so many other underutilized resources that exist that I think companies are really going to have to give more attention to in order to know that they are reaching various populations and achieving that diversity that they're looking for within their company. So our economy has been classified as resilient, and we've landed on several lists that suggest that we will recover from COVID faster than other metros. But when you see the data and this disparity that exists amongst industry sectors, what's the real story, and how do we find balance and remain a strong economy moving forward?
So the first point, I think, of the economy being classified as resilient and talking about recovery, I think is true. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we have a very strong workforce pipeline and a very strong IT and life sciences sector, which are two sectors that are expressing the most optimism about ongoing growth. I also think that there is a flip side to this, and there's going to be a real challenge related to hiring slowdowns in industries like restaurants, retail, hospitality, public sector, utilities, construction. There's going to be a large, that employs a large portion of the workforce that is going to struggle for a longer term to continue to work, and will require some reskilling to work in some of these growing areas. So while we are likely to see kind of a strong rebound being led by companies in the IT and life sciences and advanced manufacturing sectors, it's going to take a long time for those effects to have a ripple throughout the economy and have impacts on things like the construction sector, the public sector, restaurants, retail, and hospitality, which when you compare them by wages, we're going to see low wage workers continuing to struggle, while some of these more higher wage industries are going to continue to do well.
So I'm interested to know, Mike, RTI does work all over the world, obviously, but you specifically, you do a lot of work all over the country and similar projects to what we've been working on here. You know our economy, you know our capabilities, and you also know those details of other communities. So how do we stack up? You know, we see that people call us resilient and we've got work to do, but when you think about other communities and how they've navigated through this and the resources that they have, in your opinion, you know, how do we stack up? Are we in a good spot?
The challenges are nationwide. The challenges that we see here are challenges that are being seen all across the U.S. I think that the advantages that the region has, I think first and foremost, is the strength in some of these industries that where people can work from home, industries that are continuing to see growth, and while kind of there's been a very significant and abrupt loss of jobs in the restaurant, retail, travel, and hospitality business, which doesn't make up as much of the economy here as it does in other parts of the country that are more reliant on tourism. But at the same time, I think that it's one thing to say, yes, we can still be optimistic, and that the perspectives, I think, on workforce here are very strong. But we also have to acknowledge that there are a lot of challenges ahead. But I think one of the benefits is that seeing the level of regional coordination that we see among economic development and workforce development across the region and across the state is also a strength, in that when we work in other parts of the country, it's more common to see tribalism among different economic development entities that want to kind of compete with each other rather than collaborate with each other. So seeing this, the level of collaboration that we see in the Triangle region, and now particularly between workforce and economic development, gives the region a good advantage as far as workforce and economic development goes.
Yeah, I think, you know, just evidenced by the responses that we got to the survey. We had close to 200 responses in Durham County, close to 150 in Johnston County. Both Chatham and Lee really embraced the survey and collected a number of responses as well. And so one of the things that we promote as economic developers to companies is the ability to access a regional workforce. So, you know, I think the collaboration really comes through when we see how truly regional the responses were to the survey. I'm encouraged by that and know that we can make good decisions for all of us moving forward related to workforce. We've got some questions from the audience, and I want to make sure we address some of those. One question that was asked is just simply, overall, do you think the responses paint a positive or negative outlook for the region? I know that we're kind of dancing sort of all around this with the questions that we're asking, but positive or negative?
My short answer is it's complicated. One thing I want to note is that we heard from businesses that were willing to take the time and take the survey. So I think from a purely survey point of view, we may have gotten a little more positive outlook than, for example, hearing from businesses that were closed or that were kind of frantically figuring out how to readjust to their new reality. So I think the responses we got, for the most part, were positive, and what challenges me with the data is that over the long term, I think it does show a positive picture in that we're going to see job growth. We're going to see some of these sectors like manufacturing, healthcare, and IT continue to grow. But in the kind of short to medium term, it's going to be challenging. And I think keeping this in the context of looking at a double-digit unemployment rate in the Raleigh and the Durham metro areas, slightly below the national average, but still, I think there's a lot of economic hardship that's going to be experienced, and the people are experiencing right now. And that coming in and saying we're going to see a longer-term jobs recovery is not as it's not an easy answer to give when we have over 100,000 people out of work right now. So when I say there are positives and negatives,
it's true.
It's true. It's a very challenging time, and I think workforce is going to be one of the most challenging parts of this economic recovery.
Yeah. So I think we've struck a nerve with our audience as it relates to sourcing talent, and this is something that we have been talking about since the last survey. I think it was one of the most compelling pieces of data that we uncovered, which is companies are still primarily sourcing through friends and networks, which speaks to a whole host of things, lack of ability to diversify, for one, but also not really setting folks up for what's to come in terms of how they're going to need to be sourcing. So some of the questions that are coming through are, what else is out there beyond friends and networks? What strategies can companies use to help diversify their pipeline? And I think about sort of the list of things that aren't being accessed, and maybe you can speak to some of those.
I think there's an important context for that as well, because we received a mix of responses ranging from kind of small 1 to 5 person businesses all the way up to 1,000 plus, major employers. And the resources that they have for sourcing and hiring are very different. And one thing that we found from doing this work is that when you break down the responses by industry size, they do start to look very different. That larger employers that have dedicated HR departments and can be spending and dedicating time to recruiting and hiring generally will have more resources available to do that kind of work. So I think the challenge, one of the big challenges, is coming from identifying new ways for small businesses to kind of recruit and hire, recruit and source talent and hire. There are kind of more creative online platforms that they can start using, and I think adoption of these online platforms is going to have to increase as people are not going to be going to kind of traditional in-person career fairs in the way that they did in the past. And then also a lot of small businesses weren't present at career fairs either. And so what it may do is, if we have broader adoption of some of these online platforms, it can allow small businesses to kind of break down a little bit that obstacle that has existed in the past to be able to access career fairs and some of these larger scale kind of recruiting and hiring tools.
Yeah, one thing that really actually surprised me was to see how few companies noted veterans and military as a source for talent. And I think we had something like, of the 700 plus responses, only 52 companies or around that number indicated that they access workforce through veterans networks. And I find that really interesting because we have approximately 20,000 military exiting annually just from the military installations in North Carolina. So you assume that there's a huge opportunity there, and I would hope that we've made progress there. But seems to still be a barrier
Mhm.
that exists between that exiting military and the companies who want to hire them.
One thing we learned, we did work with the Defense Alliance of North Carolina last year on their strategy for the defense industry in the state. And one thing we noted, and I was very struck by a conversation I had with the head of NC for me, I think it's North Carolina for Military Employment, that they attend career fairs and there's different sort of veterans hiring events, but what they've found to be most effective is a lot more kind of one-on-one matching and one-on-one mentoring from kind of the individual in the company that goes beyond just typical career fairs or military hiring events, because what they're finding is that the kind of the skills and experience that people gain when they're in military service are usually pretty effective in the workforce, but they don't translate well in the short term. And so unless you have somebody within the kind of recruiting and hiring network who understands how those skills and experience translate into the workforce, it's very hard to translate that. It's very hard to break down that barrier. And so the NC for me was an interesting case in how to better connect veterans leaving the military to good jobs.
Yeah, and I would just encourage any of our businesses that are on today that maybe have stumbled onto some roadblocks with that, or are just interested in accessing that population specifically, to let us know and let us help connect you to some of the resources that exist, and also share your challenges so that we can take better advantage of those skilled folks coming out of the military. So soft skills is buzzing in the question box right now, and we always are talking about soft skills and how difficult they can be, not only to source but to teach, as we as our workforce learns skills differently and has a different set of skills. Things are evolving, so we're getting lots of questions about soft skills, and one of those is that we noted that responsibility, self-discipline, critical thinking, and taking initiative continue to be the most difficult skills for employers to find in applicants. So simply, why do you think that is? And what do you think employers can do to grow these skills on the job?
Well, the kind of the why question, as you mentioned before, we do work like this all around North Carolina, around the US, and around the world. And that response is universal. Every employer around the world is saying that we want a workforce that's more responsible, that takes initiative, that's doing more critical thinking. We've heard it in business surveys everywhere. And I think it's especially poignant now because businesses have had to really rapidly pivot their business operations. And so they're looking for, they're seeing that they need employees that have that kind of responsibility, self-discipline, critical thinking. And so why is it occurring? I think that is an age-old question that I'm afraid I may not have an easy answer to that. But what we have learned is that there are some effective ways that companies and workforce development partners can help to address some of those challenges. And kind of universally, what we've heard from employers is that the more that you can get people exposure to your industry, on the job experience, internships, apprenticeships, mentoring, the better that the employees that they're going to get. We received a lot of comments in the survey about how we want to get employees in the door who already have some experience, or find ways for them to get on the job experience through programs like internships and apprenticeships. And I think with the kind of new employment situation that we're going to be living in for the next couple of years, it's going to be a real challenge to get young people, and I'm not talking about millennials, I'm a millennial, we're talking about Generation Z, we're talking about the young people that are coming into the workforce, which I hate to say, like I'm no longer one of them. It's going to be really hard because we're going to have a generation of people coming into the workforce who are going to struggle to get those kind of internships and on-the-job experience at an early stage that are really critical for developing a lot of those soft skills. So a new kind of, we're going to need to think in a new way of how do we get people on-the-job experience and an internship experience in an era of social distancing and high unemployment. And I think that's going to be a big challenge that we face moving forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's going to increase in its challenge, but it's going to also increase in how important it is to figure it out. And I want to give a plug for NCBCE's platform, The Navigator. It is an online sort of matching service between schools and businesses to help make meaningful connections so that students can learn and teachers can learn about occupations. And if you haven't checked out the Navigator, I highly suggest doing that. It's a great tool that we have in North Carolina to start to bridge this divide between businesses and everything that they know, but also our school system and everything that they're teaching. And just a funny little anecdote, we do a lot of work with Wake County Public Schools teachers, and I share this information with them. And when I say, you know, companies say that they're having a hard time finding responsibility, self-discipline, critical thinking, and taking initiative, the teachers are just like, yeah, us too. we can't find it in our students. Of course they can't find it in their employees, and that always makes me laugh. But it's definitely a continuum, right? It's something that everybody has to participate in to ensure that we're growing a well-rounded workforce. I've got maybe time for 2 more questions. Anita Brown Graham, she asked this question, and she knows so much, and I want to make sure I ask her question. So given the increasing focus on high value certificates, what is your prediction on how these projections about college degrees will be revised? And I'm thinking about some trends we're already seeing shifting, right? From our last survey was across the board, the 4-year degree was the requirement, and now we've seen a shift a little bit to credentials and other certifications. So what are your thoughts there?
There will certainly still be a space for the 4-year college degree and advanced degrees in the workforce. I think that those, but I think people are still going to pursue those degrees, and that that higher education, kind of the 4-year degree, still is going to play a really critical role in shaping the workforce. I think one thing that's going to get layered on top of that is that the 4-year degree alone is not going to be sufficient, because we're going to see industries changing so rapidly. So the need for, you know, folks who are working in construction management to be able to use software platforms it's one example that we've seen of how we have a whole segment of the workforce that's been trained to work a certain way, and then all of a sudden a disruptive digital technology comes in, and becoming certified on that technology, you know, is one example of how it's still going to remain very important, but these things are not. I don't see these things as being opposed as much as they're going to be complementary, and one's going to require the other.
Yeah, you know, that is something that is always hard to know if there's been progress made towards sort of just an opening up of being willing to look at applicants beyond just the 4-year degree, and understanding that we are reducing barriers. So to see that is changing a little bit is encouraging, because we need all of that. We need the 4-year degrees, we need the 2-year certifications, we need the high value credentials. It's going to take all of that to truly both recover and then sustain moving forward.
Yeah.
Last question for you. This whole Economic Development Summit that we've been having is about the evolution of economic development. We have felt for a long time at the Chamber and Wake County Economic Development that workforce development is key in the work that we do. So knowing where we are in the world and what's happening, what do you think economic developers' roles are going to be related to workforce development moving forward?
We hear conversation, no matter where we go, we hear conversations about the importance of linking economic and workforce development. I think that the work that y'all do with the Raleigh Chamber and Wake County Economic Development and all your partners is really putting that into practice. We hear people in other parts of the country talk about combining economic and workforce development, and it's exciting to see that you're acting on it. And I think when we look at the sectors that have the most optimistic view on job growth over the next 3 years, those are all sectors that are going to require a highly educated workforce, whether, as you said, it's a mix of 4-year degrees, specialized credentials, 2-year degrees. When we look at things like life science, IT, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, those require a skilled workforce. And so I think that the type of economic development that we're going to have to see moving forward as we get people back into jobs is going to have to be really focused on workforce and on skills because of the kind of the nature of the industries and how different industries have been impacted in different ways by this pandemic and economic crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I do know is that all of our workforce and education providers, from NC State to Wake Tech to the Workforce Board to the school system, are all so open and willing to partner and collaborate. And we really are resource rich here in the Triangle and can really achieve pretty much any workforce challenge that's put in front of us. And so I'm excited to have this data to help inform that work moving forward. I think that for me, one of the biggest takeaways here is just how we're going to shift and adapt in this virtual world that looks like it will be our foreseeable future, the impact on job fairs and networking and making sure we're not increasing this digital divide, and the need for employers to think of how to diversify their own pipelines. And so we're looking forward to that being a part of the conversation. There's a lot of opportunity wrapped up in that. So Mike, that's going to conclude our presentation. I just want to say thank you so much for your presentation, for all the work that you've given to our audience, for sending in questions. It's been a pleasure to do this today and also to work with you, Mike, as always. I want to also thank our sponsors again for the support of this event. Our gold sponsor is Credit Suisse. Our silver sponsors, the City of Raleigh and the Office of Economic Development and Innovation and Highwoods Properties. Our bronze sponsors, Carolina Hurricanes, Martin Marietta, Relate Advocacy, and Wake Tech Community College. Our final seminar will be on July 15th at 10 a.m. And during the last seminar, we will bring everything together with a key takeaway segment from Michael Haley. The seminar also will feature a CEO to CEO conversation that will cover what's next for the region. You're going to hear from Adrian Cole, President and CEO of the Raleigh Chamber, and David Morgan, Chairman and CEO of Bandwidth. So if you haven't registered for the entire summit, you can register for this individual event at RaleighChamber.org. So in the coming days, you'll receive a recording of this conversation along with a blog that Mike is writing, recapping today's virtual event. So that's it for us today. I want to thank you all and hope you have a great day. Thanks.